So there we are with that. Scott Dochterman, we've had Scott on many times before to discuss Iowa Big Ten football. He joins Craig and Paul. I'm David Smoak. Scott, thank you very much for your time. So you wrote an article, 24-team format like the FCS and much more. How much fun was that to write it and see how it might have worked out?
Oh, it was great. I've always enjoyed kind of playing around with these types of scenarios and seeing where it takes me. And I think this one was every bit as fun as that. And watching FCS and D2 and some of the other levels go through a major tournament like this, 24-plus teams, it was fun to really apply and see how it would have impacted Division I or FBS football. And I think going through the process, trying to keep it as close as I could to what the committee came up with, I think it was really interesting.
So Scott, I read the article this morning, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh, well, that'll never happen. But then there is a school of thought that if the 12-team playoff works out well enough and they make enough money from the 12-team playoff, and they're kind of skewing towards an NFL model anyway, where the NFL keeps expanding their playoffs in their season, it's not too far outside the realm of possibility that maybe there would eventually be a fervor for maybe not all the way to 24, but more teams than 12.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we'll see is, the first thing will be the first couple of years of 12 teams. I think you're going to see the first 4 teams that have byes get really jealous very quickly and say that, why is it that teams 5 through 8 get a game on their campus and we can't? And you look at these 4 teams currently that are going to the playoffs, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. What would it be like if they held a game on their campus and, in a playoff game, and especially when you start to get into that second round where there's some really big matchups, instantly those would become some of the biggest matchups any of those campuses would ever have held. And so I would anticipate even by the second or third year that some of those schools are going to start to say that we need to have some of these games on campuses. And the other fact that is, if you've got a good team and that can go around the distance, I mean, you're going to have 3 games at destination locations. I mean, what's the average fan going to do from even Austin to say that they'd have to go to Pasadena, Miami, and New Orleans or something like that? And, in 3 out of 4 weekends, that's going to be just a lot to ask of your fan base. So that's why I think that the home campuses are going to be, something that's going to be pushed first. And then you're going to start to see a push for 16 teams because, the upper level bowl games aren't going to be good enough. And then finally, I could see a 24 team type playoff, starting to really work its way around the sport. And we're talking probably a decade away, but that was one of the things when they went to a 4-team playoff that I remember Jim Delaney saying we didn't want any bracket creep. Well, here we are. They're ending it early.
So, Scott, you're clearly a proponent for an expanded playoff, as I think most of us I think all of us at this table are as well. What are your thoughts when people say that it will water down the regular season, although this is probably the worst year ever to say anything about watering down the regular season with the postseason decision that was made? Yeah,
I mean, I think you're gonna automatically take something away. And in Big Ten country, for instance, now that they're eliminating divisions, you could have the potential for 3 Michigan-Ohio State games, not only playing the final regular season game, but playing in the Big Ten championship game and then possibly meeting them again in the playoffs. So that's something that I think would water down the regular season. Maybe not, a rematch, but if you get 3 games against the same teams, that could really stand out. But, I still think these games matter. The rivalry games matter. Conference championships matter. But ultimately getting to the playoff is going to be kind of like getting into March Madness, getting into the NCAA tournament is what matters. Winning a Big 12 or Big 10 men's basketball title is important, but ultimately it's how you perform in March. And I think for teams that are just on the outside, that always seem to be outside looking in, like a Penn State, for instance, the tournament's going to be a godsend because the New Year's Six bowls are like consolation prizes, and you're going to see there are tons of opt-outs. and the transfer portals impact some of those teams. When you get to the tournament and you got a chance to win a national championship, people aren't going to opt out. If they do, then I hope there's some strong questions by the NFL, because unless they're injured, that will look like quitting more than it will be opting out.
There was a time you had to play 10 games, then it was 11. My God, it went to 12 and 13. Now it can be 15 or so. Scott, would there be anything in danger that we now have in college football, conference championship games or otherwise, that might have to be, I don't know if the word would be eliminated, but have to be looked into about playing those games?
Yeah, I think if they do go something deeper than what we will have next year, the 12-team model, then I think you're going to have to eliminate the conference championship game or incorporate it as part of the regular season. I think what we saw during the COVID year was the Big Ten called it Champions Week, and it was kind of a matchup week. And in a lot of the games didn't even get played because of COVID. But that could be something that could be a part of it. Say Thanksgiving weekend, where conferences have like one open game scheduled, and maybe they figure it out as far as who gets a home game, who doesn't, that sort of thing. But you reserve the championship; it's part of the regular season. That's something that I think could end up happening. Or I could even see week 0 actually becoming week 1 to kind of space this out a little bit. But yeah, if you're asking a lot out of these athletes who are officially still unpaid to go through, take their bodies through this rigorous season, you're probably going to have to subtract something in order to ensure that they can last the whole tournament.
Scott, you did cover the FCS playoffs. You mentioned in the column today as well. And it is weird to me that, the argument, sometimes, what money and this and that. But at that level, they have less money, less amenities and all that. And it seems to work for them very well, and they love it.
They love it. I covered Division II for about 4 or 5 years back in the early 2000s. And I covered Northwest Missouri State when I lived in St. Joseph, Missouri, and they were always in the playoffs. And the playoffs really mattered. It galvanized the community. It's kind of like it's real similar to high school football playoffs. It just it's just farther away. And when you look at like some of the games this last weekend at FCS level, with Montana hosting, North Dakota State was on the road, South Dakota State was at home, and then I looked at some of the D3 schools, and I think this was it really is important. I don't know that you can incorporate the bowl structure for teams like that, but getting the chance to go to Frisco or wherever those championship games are held, they really matter at that level. So I think they would be the same thing. I think it's going to be the same thing come next year when they get a taste of the tournament and you start to see some of those on-campus games where maybe the Big Ten and SEC mix it up for a game or so on the first weekend. It's just going to be something special.
Scott, you covered Iowa, obviously the Big Ten, a team that is probably I guess in the radar, under the radar, the microscope more than anybody else because of the offense, but yet they just keep on winning. They just keep winning where most teams wish they could go 10-2 or whatever every single year. What about them moving forward without Ferentz as the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, now that they've got to hire a new offensive coordinator, it's going to be interesting to see what direction they take this program goes, because there are certain positives that they have that, as you mentioned, that you don't go 10-2 against any competition unless you're well coached, you're disciplined, you're tough, you're hard nosed, you were able to make things happen. And yes, their defense was outstanding this year, as good as I can ever remember it, and probably the best coaching job they ever did. And the offense, they had a lot of injuries this year, which really hurt them. But then they covered it up by not having players that were capable of carrying it out. So I think going forward with an expanded Big Ten, and they're still going to be a competitive program, but how do they win some of those games? It's going to all depend on, who they hire as an offensive coordinator, they can bring in, whether it's from the portal or just upward. And I still think they'll be competitive because, year in and year out, Kirk Ferentz does a really good job with the talent he has. And once in a while, when they have really exceptional talent, they can get right up in there. And I think there's, a bevy of teams, probably the number 15 to 20. I think Baylor's another one. This year wasn't their best year, obviously, but a couple of years ago, they were outstanding, that I think can get in that territory depending on how the season works out, injuries, schedule, and just a few variables when they go their way.
Scott, is Kirk Ferentz ready to, like you mentioned, they've got to see who they get and what can happen in the portal, but approach things differently because the Big Ten West is over. Like it's done. So they're not going to have that schedule where, okay, if we get Minnesota and these teams that play the similar style as us, we can maybe run and hide with this. It's wide open now with 18 teams.
That's where their adjustments are going to have to take place on offense. And, his son is done after the bowl game, and I think that's where they're going to have to move forward. But, one of the kind of misnomers, they did have a winning record against the East teams, and they were the only team to beat every one of them, including Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State multiple times. So that they'll be competitive. Wisconsin will be as well once they kind of get right. Where it's going to be difficult at times, it's really at the top, because the East Division gets a big name, because it has those three powerhouses. But the rest of the division, Michigan State's not been very good. Indiana's been terrible. Rutgers and Maryland are average at best. So the West actually has a higher floor. There's more competitiveness. But, of course, the East has a higher ceiling. I think you mix it all up, and you're still going to see kind of the same cream rise to the top. But then the wild cards are the new teams. Because immediately you think, wow, USC and UCLA. Well, they didn't play very well this year. USC didn't. I think they played, 9-man defense this year, and Washington and Oregon are great, but they can fluctuate up and down too, and going across the country is going to be really challenging for them. So it's going to. There's a lot of fascinating developments going on with the Big Ten, and I'm really anxious to see how it all plays out.
Scott, I have to ask you, with Matt Rule at Nebraska, that they were, at the end of the year, they found ways to lose games in which they had them wrapped up even early in the year. Did you see something that was different under Matt Rule the first year, despite the fact you had another bowl season or a lack of a bowl season?
Yeah, I think they made great strides. Defensively, they haven't played like this in close to 10 years. They were one of the better teams in the Big Ten defensively. And then line of scrimmage play on offense was really good. Their skill position players made just too many mistakes. Quarterback was a mess for them. Mm-hmm. Running back was okay, and they didn't really have anybody stand out at the wide receiver position. So, whether they go in the portal, I know they've had Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming visit them this last weekend from Ohio State. If they can land a combination like that, Nebraska's in the same pot. They just, surprisingly, they haven't been to a bowl game since 2016, which anybody who can remember, even in the early 2000s, would have thought there's just no way that it would ever happen. But I think Matt Rule has done a good job of putting them back on track. And once he gets his players at the skill positions, then Nebraska will be a competitive program, at least for the middle class of the Big Ten, and not where they've kind of slummed it up for the last 7-8 years.
Good stuff. Again, go to the article, Scott Dochterman, again, on the 2014 playoff, or at least what would be like compared to what the FBS has right now. Scott, thank you very much for your time. Craig?
Yeah, Scott, let me ask you this. In this situation, how much bigger is that Citrus Bowl with Iowa and Tennessee? Now, I know they'd be on the edge there as far as how big you expand it, but let's say you get it to 24, that'd be a playoff game. How much more exciting, enticing would that be compared to however it is Hawkeyes fans are feeling about playing Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl as is?
That's exactly going to be the point with the 2014 team. Because the Alamo Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, the bowl formerly known as the Outback, those were upper tier kind of bowls, but now they're going to be letdowns for those teams that are 13, 15, 17 that thought they had a chance, but they lost their conference championship game or what have you. In the Citrus Bowl now, it's kind of like, hey, first prize outside of the New Year's Six. And going forward, if you got a chance to play for a playoff spot or in a playoff, maybe it's at Neyland Stadium, maybe it's at Kinnick Stadium. I think that would just be the environment and the energy around this game would be so much different that it is now, where it's kind of like, yeah, we'll go to Orlando and have a good time, and play a game, but you wouldn't have. I think there's 6 players for the Tennessee secondary that's opted out. Now that still may not help Iowa any, but but I think if you were to see it the way it's Tennessee's offense versus Iowa's defense in a real game at one of those stadiums, it would just be an awesome development.
Thank you, Scott. Good stuff as always. Scott Dochterman with us, The Athletic. That story is in or